You returned. But because tonight, the shadows have something to whisper. Welcome back to Moonlight Tales. Lock your doors. The story begins now. My reflection stopped smiling first. They say grief does strange things to your brain. It's like a physical weight that sits behind your eyes, blurring the edges of the world until nothing feels quite solid anymore. When my brother Leo died in that car accident 3 months ago, I expected the tears. I expected the anger. I didn't expect the silence to start lying to me. My name is Elias, and I'm a high school history teacher in a small town in Ohio. I'm the kind of guy who believes in facts, dates, and things you can prove. Or at least, I used to be. It started on a Tuesday. About a week after the funeral, I was standing in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. Over the pedestal sink, the fluorescent light was buzzing, that low, irritating hum that gets under your skin. I looked like a ghost of the man I used to be. My eyes were sunken. My skin was the color of old parchment, and I hadn't shaved in 4 days. I forced myself to smile. My therapist told me it was a cognitive behavioral trick. Fake it until your brain catches up. So I pulled the corners of my mouth up into a hollow, painful grin. I looked away to reach for my toothbrush. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. It was a flicker, a momentary hitch in the world. I looked back at the mirror instantly. The reflection, my reflection, was still smiling. But I wasn't. My face had already dropped. I was staring at the glass with a neutral, tired expression. But the man in the mirror was still showing his teeth. It only lasted for a fraction of a second, a heartbeat at most, before the reflection's face snapped back into place, mimicking mine, with a jagged, unnatural speed. Froze. The toothbrush slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink. It's the lack of sleep, Elias, I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded thin, like it was being squeezed out of me. I went to bed early that night, but the image of that lingering smile burned behind my eyelids. It wasn't just that it stayed, it was the way it stayed. It looked less like a smile and more like a sneer, something predatory and hungry. The next day at school was a blur. I was grading papers in the teacher's lounge when I caught my reflection in the glass of the vending machine. I didn't smile this time. I just watched. I stood there for 5 minutes, pretending to decide between a bag of chips and a granola bar. But my eyes were locked on the glass. Everything seemed normal. The reflection moved when I moved, blinked when I blinked. I started to feel a wave of relief wash over me. It was just a hallucination, thought, a trick of the light, and a grieving mind. I turned to walk away, feeling a weight lift off my chest. But as I shifted my weight, I saw my reflection's arm move. In the glass, the other Elias didn't turn with me. He stayed squared to the machine, his hand slowly reaching out toward the glass from the inside. His fingers splayed wide, as if trying to feel the surface. I spun around, my heart hammering, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. There was no one behind me. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the vending machine. My reflection was back to normal, perfectly mimicking my panic stance. "Is someone there?" called out, my voice echoing off the lockers. No answer, just the distant sound of the gym class in the next wing, and the heavy, oppressive thud of my own pulse in my ears. I didn't go back to the lounge. I went to my car. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles turned white. I thought about calling my mom, but what would I say? Hey mom, I think my reflection is moving on its own. She was already burying one son. I couldn't let her think the other one was losing his mind. When I got home, I did something I'm not proud of. I went into every room of my house and covered the mirrors. I used old bed sheets, towels, even some duct tape and cardboard. I felt like a crazy person, a man living in a tomb of fabric, but it was the only way I could breathe, except for the one in the hallway. It was a full-length antique mirror that had belonged to my grandmother. It was bolted to the wall, and the frame was too heavy to move alone. I threw a heavy wool blanket over it and pinned it at the top. That night, the house felt different. It was too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tink, tink, tink. It was coming from the hallway. I climbed out of bed, my feet cold on the hardwood. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the nightstand and crept toward the door. The tapping stopped the moment I reached the threshold. I swung the flashlight beam into the hallway. The blanket I had pinned over the antique mirror was lying on the floor. It hadn't fallen. It looked like it had been pulled down, the fabric bunched up at the base of the frame. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get out of the house, and never look back. But I couldn't move. I was anchored to the floor by a terrifying curiosity. I slowly raised the flashlight. The beam hit the silvered surface of the glass. The reflection wasn't me. 'Twas Leo, my brother, was standing in the mirror, wearing the same suit he'd been buried in. His face was pale. His eyes were milky and sightless. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, trapped behind the glass. But the worst part wasn't seeing my dead brother. The worst part was that he was looking over his shoulder, pointing a trembling finger at something behind him, something standing in the dark corner of the reflections room. And then, Leo's reflection did something that shattered my heart. He pressed his hand against the glass, leaving a foggy print in mouth. 3 words I'll never forget. It's not me. The flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering onto the floor and rolling away, its beam dancing wildly across the ceiling. I scrambled backward until my back hit the opposite wall. I didn't want to look again, but I couldn't stop. I shouldn't have been able to see him. The hallway was pitch black, but the mirror seemed to be glowing with a faint, sickly luminescence. Leo was still there, but the image was shifting. The suit he was wearing started to tatter, and the milky film over his eyes began to leak, a dark viscous fluid. He looked like he was rotting in real time. He pounded on the glass, a silent, rhythmic thud that I felt in my chest more than I heard with my ears. Leo, choked out, my voice barely a whisper. The figure in the glass up. He leaned his forehead against the surface, his breath fogging the mirror from the inside. He shook his head slowly, his expression twisted in absolute agony. He looked past me, not at me, at the empty space in the hallway, right behind my left shoulder. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. I just bolted. I sprinted into my bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved my heavy dresser in front of it. I crawled onto my bed, pulling the covers over my head, like a terrified child. I stayed like that for hours, listening to the house breathe. Every settling beam sounded like a bone snapping. Every gust of wind against the window sounded like a whispered name. When the sun finally began to bleed through the curtains, the terror didn't vanish, just changed shape. The shadows in the room looked too long, too deep. I realized then that I wasn't just afraid of the mirrors anymore. I was afraid of anything that could cast a reflection. The polished wood of the dresser, the screen of my phone, even the dark surface of a cup of coffee. I called in sick in school. I couldn't face the students. I couldn't face the hallway of lockers that acted like 1,000 silver eyes, watching my every move. I spent the morning in my living room, the curtains drawn tight, sitting in the middle of the floor, where no shadows could reach me. I needed answers. Leo and I had been close, closer than most brothers. We used to spend our summers at our grandmother's house, the one where that antique mirror had come from. She used to tell us stories about the second soul, an old folk belief that everyone had a twin, born of light and shadow. She told us never to let our reflections see us cry, because sadness was an invitation for the shadow take the lead. I had always laughed those stories. Grandma was a superstitious woman who saw omens in spilled salt and black cats. But now, sitting in the dark, I felt a cold dread settling in my marrow. I reached for my laptop, keeping the screen tilted away so I wouldn't see my face in the black glass. Searched for mirror hallucinations, grief-induced psychosis, and otoscopic phenomena. The results were filled with medical jargon about the brain's parietal lobe and the way trauma can disrupt our sense of self. It was comforting, in a way. It gave my fear a name. That wasn't ghosts. But then, I found a thread on an old obscure paranormal forum. The title was, "My Reflection is Faster Than Me." Clicked it. The original post was from 3 years ago. The user described exactly what I had seen: the delay in movement, the lingering smile, the feeling of being watched from the inside. They mentioned that it started after a significant loss. I scrolled down to the comments. Most were skeptics, but one reply stood out. It was from a user named Silver_. "It's not a glitch." The comment read, "It's a vacancy. When you lose someone you love, a piece of your soul leaves with them. It leaves a hole. The thing on the other side, the one that has spent your whole life mimicking you, sees that hole. It's tired of being a shadow. It wants to be the light. If your reflection stops smiling, it's because it's no longer your reflection. It's a tenant." My stomach turned over. I felt a sudden sharp pain in my hand. I looked down. I was gripping my phone so hard, the screen had cracked. In the jagged, spider-webbed cracks of the phone screen, I saw a sliver of my face. The reflection wasn't looking at me. It was looking at the bedroom door I had barricaded, and it was laughing. Not a sound, just the sight of a throat vibrating with silent, hysterical joy. I threw the phone, crossed the room. It hit the wall and shattered. "Get out!" I screamed. "Get out of my house!" The silence that followed was broken by a sound that made my heart stop. It was the sound of a sheet being torn, then another, and another. The coverings I had put over the mirrors in the other rooms were being ripped down. Whip, whip, whip. I heard the heavy wool blanket in the hallway hit the floor, and then I heard a voice. It wasn't Leo's voice. It wasn't my voice. It was a distorted, mocking version of both, layered together. "Elias," the voice called from the hallway. "Open the door. I want to show you what I found." The dresser I had pushed in front of the door began to slide, not because someone was pushing it. There was no struggle, no breathing. It moved smoothly, as if the floor beneath it had become frictionless. The door creaked open. An inch. A hand reached through the gap. It was my hand. I knew the scar on the knuckle from when I'd fallen off my bike, 10 years old. I knew the shape of the fingernails, but the skin was too pale. The fingers, too long. The hand gripped the edge of the door and pulled. I backed into the corner of my room, clutching a heavy book as my only weapon. The door swung wide, hitting the wall with a dull thud. Standing in the doorway was me. He was wearing the same clothes, the gray hoodie, the sweatpants, but he stood with a posture I never had, bright, confident, shoulders back, and his face was perfectly still, like a mask carved from ice. He didn't speak with his mouth. The voice came from the mirrors downstairs, echoing up the vents. "You're so tired, Elias," it whispered. "You've been carrying so much weight. Let me carry it for you. Just step into the light." He stepped into the room, and as he moved, I noticed something horrifying. He didn't cast shadow. The light from the window hit him, passed through him, and left the floor bright and clear. He reached out his hand. "One trade, Elias. Your grief for my freedom. Don't you want to see Leo again? He's right here, just on the other side of the glass." I looked past him into the hallway. The antique mirror was glowing now, bright, blinding white. Inside it, I could see my grandmother's kitchen. I could smell the cinnamon. I could see Leo sitting at the table, his back to me. "Leo," sup. The thing that looked like me. Smile. This time, it wasn't a sneer. It was the most beautiful, comforting smile I had ever seen. "Go to him," he said. "I'll stay here. I'll take care of everything." I took a step forward. My grief was a physical pain, a screaming void in my chest that wanted nothing more than to be filled. I wanted my brother. I wanted the world to make sense again. I reached out my hand to touch the twins' hand. Our fingers were an inch apart. That's when I noticed the twins' eyes. They weren't brown, like mine. They weren't milky, like Leo's ghost. They were empty. 2 holes of pure, infinite blackness, stretching back into a void where stars went to die. And in that blackness, I saw the truth. I pulled my hand back, as if I'd touched live wire. The sudden movement caused the air in the room to turn freezing, a dry, artificial cold that made my breath bloom. In front of me, like a white shroud, the thing that looked like me didn't flinch. It just kept that beautiful, terrifying smile fixed on its face. But the blackness in its eyes seemed to spill outward, staining the whites until they were like 2 ink blots. "You're overthinking it, Elias," the voice said. This time, the sound didn't come from the vents, came from the thing's chest. Hollow, vibrating resonance. "The pain you feel," continued, "the way your heart physically hurts when you think of Leo, that's a defect. In my world, there is no weight. There is only the image. No rot, no loss, no dying. Get away from me." Choked out, I felt the dresser behind me, the hard edge of the wood digging into my spine. I was trapped. The double took a step closer. Its movements were fluid, like water flowing uphill. You think you're protecting yourself? It said softly. You're just clinging to a corpse. Look at the mirror, Elias. Look at what you're throwing away. I looked past its shoulder, drawn by an irresistible pull. In the antique mirror, the scene had changed. It wasn't just Grandma's kitchen anymore. It was a memory. Leo and I, kids, the lake, the sun setting behind the pines, fishing lines cast into glass-calm water. Leo looked up. His face was vibrant, alive. His laugh echoed out of the mirror and into the cold hallway. Elias, come on, Leo called. You're gonna miss the bite. His voice was clear as a bell. It didn't sound like a ghost. Sounded like life itself. For a second, the grief in my chest loosened. The temptation pressed against me, like hands on my back. Siren song, telling me I could leave this cold gray house, could go back, could be whole again. Just reach out. The double whispered, give me the weight. I'll walk your halls. I'll teach your classes. I'll tell your mother you're feeling better. I'll do it better than you ever could. Because I don't feel the cracks. My hand began to rise again. Not by choice. Felt like invisible strings were tied to my fingers, pulling me forward. But as I looked at the mirror, I saw something wrong. In the reflection of the lake, beneath Leo's boat, there were faces, dozens of them, then hundreds. They weren't people. They were masked, empty white shells, floating just beneath the surface, all staring upward, with the same hollow, black eyes. And one of them, had Leo's face. The real Leo. He was pressed against the underside of the water. His mouth was open, in a silent scream. His fingers clawed the liquid ceiling. The Leo on the boat, the one laughing, the one calling my name, was a puppet, just like the thing in front of me. No, I whispered. I grabbed the heavy book in my hands, an old leather-bound history of the county, and I threw it. With everything I had left, the book passed straight through the double's chest. It didn't hit flesh. It didn't slow down. It struck the wall behind him with a dull thud. The double's smile didn't fade. Inverted, its jaw dropped open, stretching far lower than a human jaw should. Inside was no throat, just a jagged, endless tunnel. Shadow. You don't get to choose anymore, Elias. A hiss plunged. I didn't feel an impact. Instead, felt like liquid nitrogen being poured into my veins. My vision went white, then black, then both, flickering violently. I felt myself being pulled backward, not by my clothes, by my essence, like being unspooled. My memories, my skin, dragged through a keyhole. I slammed into something cold, hard, glass, gasped for air. The air tasted wrong, like static, and old dust. I opened my eyes. I was in the hallway, but the hallway was wrong. The walls were dull gray, flat, lifeless. The lights didn't glow. They were just white rectangles, painted on the ceiling. I turned around. I saw a man, standing in my bedroom. He stretched his arms, cracked his neck, like dry branches snapping. He looked down at his hands, turning them over, with pure, curious joy. It was me, my body, the thing I used to be. I ran to the glass, pounded on it. No, let me back in. Give it back. The thing turned around. It walked toward the mirror, slowly, satisfied. On his side, the world was warm. Everything was fading. The weight is gone, Elias said, his voice muffled, as if through a wall. You were right. It was too much for you. I'll take it from here. Picked up the wool blanket. Wait. Oh, please. I screamed. It didn't listen. With one smooth motion, it threw the blanket over the mirror. Darkness collapsed around me. Absolute, crushing, final. I was no longer a man. I was a reflection. With nothing to reflect, I stood in the void. Through the silence, heard it. Soft rhythmic tapping. Tink, tink, tink. A hand touched my shoulder. Cold. Butted. I told you. A familiar voice whispered. I told you. It wasn't me. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was a physical weight. Felt like being buried alive. In a tomb. A velvet. I reached out, my hands trembling, and felt the surface of the mirror. It was cold, so cold. Felt like it was biting into my skin, but it was smooth. On the other side of that thin, silvered barrier, a monster was wearing my face, sleeping in my bed, breathing my air. Leo, I whispered. My voice didn't echo, just fell flat, as if the darkness was swallowing the sound before it could travel an inch. A faint, sickly green glow began to emanate from the hand on my shoulder. Turned slowly. Leo was there, but he wasn't the vibrant brother from the boat. He was the man from the funeral, the one I had tried so hard to forget. His skin was translucent. Beneath it, could see the dark frozen tracks of the accident's damage. We don't have long, Elias, Leo said. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering across a grave. The longer you stay here, he continued, the more the static takes you. Look at your hands. I looked down. My fingers were flickering. The edges of my skin were blurring into gray pixels, like a low-resolution image, struggling to load. I was losing my definition. I was becoming background detail. How do I get back? Yes. My chest tightened with a panic that felt far away, as if even my emotions were being dampened by this place. He covered the mirror. Leo, I'm trapped. Every reflection is a door, Leo said, pointing into the infinite gray void behind us. But in here, he continued, the geography doesn't follow the rules of the living. This place is built on memories and regrets. If you want to go back, he said, you have to find a reflection that isn't guarded. You have to find a leak. He led me through the darkness. As we walked, the world began to manifest, but it was wrong. A distorted, nightmare version of our childhood home. The hallway stretched for miles. The doors were 10 feet tall. Everything was silent, except for one thing. A distant, muffled sound. Heartbeat. Low. Steady. Lump. Lump. Pulse. Through the floorboards. That's him, Leo whispered, looking up at the ceiling. The double. That's the sound of your heart beating in his chest. As long as he's in your body, Leo said. He controls the light, but he can't be everywhere at once. We passed a window, but it didn't look into the street. It looked into a memory, a grocery store. From 3 years ago, I saw myself, the real me, laughing as I picked out a carton of eggs. Felt surreal, watching my own life, like a movie I'd forgotten I had filmed. Why is he doing this, Leo? Asked. Why me? Leo stopped in front of a door. It was wrapped in heavy iron chains. Because you let go, Elias, he said. When I died, you stopped looking at yourself. You started looking through yourself. You became a ghost before you were even dead. And that gave him the opening he needed. He didn't steal your life, Leo said softly. He just moved into the space you vacated. The guilt hit me like a blade. He was right. I had wished to disappear. I had prayed for numbness, and the universe had answered with a monster. Suddenly, the floor beneath us, a deafening screech, like metal grinding in stone, tore through the air. He's cleaning, Leo hissed. He's destroying the mirrors. If he breaks them all, Leo shouted. The doors close. Forever. The world began to dissolve. The walls crumbled into gray ash. The kitchen vanished. The stairs evaporated. There, Leo pointed. A small, jagged fragment, floating in the air. Piece of my phone. A shard of glass. A reflection. It's too small, he yelled. It's the only one left. Leo grabbed my hand. You have to jump, Elias. You have to want to be alive. You have to take back the weight. I looked at the shard. Through its cracked surface, I saw the bedroom, the double. He held a hammer. Focused. He walked toward the antique mirror. He raised the hammer. Go! Leo shoved me. He lunged. As I flew, I looked back. Leo wasn't following. He stood at the edge of the dissolving world, smiling. I love you, Elias, he whispered. Don't come back. For a long time, I hit the shard. Felt like being forced through a needle. The pain was astronomical. Every bone, every nerve, every memory, compressed into a single point of light. Gasp. Slammed into my lungs. I was on the floor of my bedroom. The carpet burned against my cheek. I could feel my body ache, cut, the heavy, beautiful thud of my heart. I looked up. The double stood in the hallway, the hammer raised high. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head. His neck creaked like dry branches breaking. He looked at me, pure fury. The blackness in his eyes leaked down his cheeks like tears of ink. You, he roared. You want the pain. You want the rot. Fine. Have it all. He didn't swing. The mirror swung me. I rolled to the left. The heavy head of the hammer whistling past my ear and smashing into the floorboards with a bone-jarring crack. The wood splintered, sending shards of oak flying like shrapnel. I scrambled to my feet, my lungs burning, my body feeling heavy and clumsy after being in that weightless gray void. This is my life, I screamed, my voice raw and cracking. Get out of my skin. The double didn't answer with words. It lunged again, its movements no longer fluid or graceful. Now that I was back, the glitch was worse. Its limbs seemed to move at a different frame rate than the rest of the world, snapping from one position to another with sickening speed. It swung the hammer in a wide, desperate arc. I backed into the hallway toward the antique mirror. I could feel the cold air radiating from the glass, reminder of the prison I had just escaped. You think you can just step back in? The voice was a distorted harmony of my own, and something ancient. The double dropped the hammer, its fingers elongating, turning into jagged, obsidian claws. You're broken, Elias. You're a vessel, full of holes. I am the one who is solid now. Tackled me. We hit the wall hard, the breath leaving my body in a wheezing rush. The double's hands clamped around my throat. Its skin felt like cold marble, but beneath that surface, I could feel my own pulse, my own warmth, being used against me. Everything started to go gray. The edges. I looked into those hollow, black eyes, and for a moment, I saw the reflection of the hallway behind me. I saw the antique mirror, and then I remembered what Leo said. It's a vacancy. You stopped looking at yourself. I stopped fighting the grip. I stopped trying to pry its fingers off my neck. Instead, I reached up and grabbed the double's face. I forced myself to look, not at the monster, but at the man it was pretending to be. I looked at the scar on the chin, the mole near the ear, the exact shade of brown in the iris that I had inherited from my father. I embraced the grief. I let every memory of Leo, every ounce of the pain I had been running from, flood my mind. I didn't push the sadness away. Pulled it into my center. I am Elias Thorne, I whispered through the chokehold. And I am the one who hurts. The double shrieked. A sound like glass shattering erupted from its throat. The black ink in its eyes began to recede, forced back by the sheer, overwhelming weight of my humanity. It couldn't handle the rot. It wanted the life, but it couldn't survive the burden of the soul that came with it. I gathered every bit of strength I had and shoved. I didn't shove it away. I shoved it toward the antique mirror. We hit the glass together. There was a moment of absolute, terrifying silence. No sound of breaking glass, just a ripple, like a stone being dropped into a deep, dark pool. I felt the double's grip loosen as the mirror began to drink it back in. It clawed at my chest, trying to stay in the light, its face twisting back into that jagged, predatory sneer. No, howled. I won't go back to the dark. You were never me, I said, my voice steady. I planted my feet and gave one final, desperate push. The double was sucked backward, its body stretched and distorted, its features blurring into gray pixels. As it was dragged through the silver surface, I felt its fingers slip from my hoodie, its cold touch vanishing. I fell forward, hitting the floor. As the mirror solidified behind me, clack, the antique glass didn't just break, detonated. I shielded my face as hundreds of silver shards rained down on the hallway. When the dust settled, the heavy frame was empty, save for a few jagged pieces of glass clinging to the edges. I lay there for a long time, listening to the sound of my own breathing. It was ragged, it was loud, it was beautiful. I stood up, my legs shaking. I walked to the bathroom and looked at the small, handheld mirror I had covered with a towel. I slowly pulled fabric away. I saw myself. I looked terrible. I had bruises on my neck, red-rimmed eyes, and a face lined with exhaustion. But when I blinked, the reflection blinked. When I breathed, the reflection breathed. And then, I did something I hadn't done in months. I didn't force a smile. I just looked at myself, really looked at myself, and acknowledged the man in the glass. I'm still here, I whispered. The reflection didn't smile back, just nodded, a weary, honest movement that matched mine perfectly. It's been 6 months now. I sold the house in Ohio. I couldn't stay in a place where the shadows felt like they were waiting for a turn. I moved to a small apartment in the city, somewhere with lots of windows and natural light. I still have Leo's picture on my desk. I still feel the hole in my heart where he used to be. Some days, the weight is so heavy, I can barely get out of bed. But I don't try to hide from it anymore. I know now that the pain is the anchor, is the thing that keeps me on this side of the glass. I still don't like mirrors much. Keep them clean, but I don't linger. But sometimes, when I'm walking past a store window, or catching my reflection in a puddle after the rain, I see a flicker, just a tiny, momentary delay. I don't run anymore. I just stop, look my reflection in the eye, and let out a long, slow breath. I let it know that the seat is taken. I let it know that as long as I'm willing to feel the cold, it will never get a chance to feel the warmth, because I'm Elias Thorne, and I'm the one who stays. YouTube outro. That was the story of the reflection that stopped smiling first. It's a reminder that our shadows are always watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. Take the lead. What did you think of Elias's journey? Have you ever looked in a mirror and felt like the person looking back wasn't quite you? It's a chilling thought, and I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story gave you the creeps, or if you enjoyed the deeper look into the cost of grief, make sure to hit that like button. It helps me bring more of these narrations to life. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a chance to explore the darker side of reality with me. Thanks for listening. Sleep well tonight, and maybe keep a light on near the mirrors